Welcome to the Small Town Pastor Podcast. This podcast is a ministry of the Small Town Network. We exist to make disciples, train pastors, and plant churches in smaller communities. We are joined for a second episode today by our friend Ben Bauman and our co-host Tony. In our previous conversation, we were talking with Ben about his church plant kind of pathway to being a small town planter in Dallas, Oregon. And as promised, we're going to kind of switch our focus now to talking a little bit about church planting, disciple making, and some of the trends we've seen in the last about 20 years. I mean, Ben, so just to kind of recap, if people didn't listen to the first episode, you were in Nashville, you were doing music, you were a big recording star, gave up your wealth to go into church planting.
Listen to the last podcast.
And what year did you go to Maple Valley to be part of your first plant?
So we moved back or to the Northwest and specifically to Maple Valley in January of 2004. So we
Okay.
kind of started the process in late 2003 with the lead planters as they were heading out to Maple Valley, but we moved in January 2000.
Okay. So it's accurate to say you've been in church planting about 20 years um,
Yes. Yep.
in some capacity, and
Mhm.
mostly as the pastor of your church in Dallas, Dallas, Oregon, Dallas Church. Okay, so we kind of started about the same time. I started in McMinnville, where you were raised, in 2002. So I was just a couple of years ahead of you, almost identical. At the time, I think your town was 20,000, mine was 30,000, both county seats, both rural, both probably bedroom communities for larger cities. So we both have been doing this for a while. Real quickly, mention a couple of the credentials you have in church planting, because in addition to being part of a couple plants, you've also worked with some different organizations and done some like is it coaching, or is that right?
Yeah, so I've done some coaching with planters and really just ministry leaders through a couple of different relationships. We were recruited initially. I was recruited originally by Stadia, and they're still around.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
Stadia, in fact, I just helped with the church plant in San Diego for the last 5, 6 years, and that was through Stadia. So it was cool to be able to work with Stadia in that, from that point as a leader that way. And then also with East 91st Street Christian Church, they were doing a lot of planting in the Northwest area, and they had a person that was represented of them, E91, here in the Northwest. And that was then with what was called the CEA, the Christian Evangelistic Association.
Yeah.
At that time was headed up by George
George Johnson. Yeah.
George Johnson, and then Jim
Mhm.
was also part of that. So yeah, a couple different organizations, and including the home church that we were part of in Antioch, Tennessee, Lakeshore Christian was a big helper and supporter of us and the company that I worked for, which was crazy.
Really?
Oh,
I
wow.
didn't know
Yeah,
that.
they were
Yeah.
like, "You're crazy, Ben. You're going to leave this good job, but hey, we'll give you some money."
That's
Awesome.
amazing.
So you've
Like,
been a planter, you've been on staff at a plant, you've been a planter, you've coached church planters. I
mhm,
know you've taught church planting
yep.
with me at Boise Bible College and I think some other places. Didn't you do like some stuff in New Zealand or something like that at some point?
So in 2012, I was wanting to take a sabbatical, and so that summer, through a lot of partnerships, I met some organizations that were doing work in New Zealand and Australia, and they
Oh,
had 4 different church plants that were kind of in early stages. And they thought it would be kind of cool for me to go and visit and maybe shed some tools that I've show some tools that I've used in the Northwest, because the Northwest and those regions, they have some similarities in
yeah.
kind of attitudes and
Hmm.
church stuff, kind of an aversion to church stuff. So,
Version to church, yeah.
in 2012, we went to, and Jackie got to go with me for the first leg of this. We went to the North Island and Auckland area. And then we also got a chance to go to the Southern Island and hit like 3 or 4 church plants. There are 3 of them in Christchurch, Auckland, and Dunedin. And Dunedin's all the way at the bottom of New Zealand. But the
Wow.
point was, we were there to try to encourage and help support, and that was a very arduous process, because several of the
Okay.
planters, well, most of the planters were not from New Zealand, from the
Oh,
Midwest, and they were struggling. and still have a lot of good friendships with some of those folks. But unfortunately, we had to it was hard for me to do, but I had to tell those organizations that I think a few of them should shut down.
Well, so you're talking to
Well,
like three native sons of Oregon, right?
That's
And
right.
over the years, collectively, we've had probably 60 years of ministry in Oregon together.
Mhm.
And I kind of joke with people from the Midwest is that Oregon is where good pastors go to die.
Oh man.
Because
I've
all these
known
guys, am I right, Tony?
I've known so many of my friends from my time at Ozark from the Midwest that made it out to the Northwest, either Oregon or Washington, and maybe a few of them lasted 5 years before eventually they went back to the Midwest. And for a variety of reasons,
Yeah.
like most people, when they grow up and have kids, they want to be back around their parents. But at the same time, it is such a cultural difference being out in the Pacific Northwest versus being in the Midwest or the South. Such a
Yeah.
cultural difference.
And so same kind of principle. Ben was trying to work with planters that were
Yeah.
not native to New Zealand and probably some major cultural.
well, what was great, I mentioned Dunedin when we were there. We met a great young couple from Illinois, as you have it, Tony and Kelsey, and we just hit it off. And um, yeah, in 2018, Tony calls me up. They had by then moved back to the States,
Mhm.
and they felt called to California, and specifically the San Diego area. And so he called me up and invited me to be part of his support team and management team.
Oh,
And
cool.
January marked the 5 year mark, and we installed their first set of elders.
Hey,
Awesome.
that's great, man.
So, it's like I feel like that whole trip in 2012 might have meant for me to be, and for Jackie and I to both to be in their lives, and that even though I recommended maybe that plant shut down,
Right.
God had other plans. And
Mhm.
so it was kind of this tough, difficult, but cool.
Yep,
Mm.
for
In fact,
sure.
they
Mhm.
blame us for starting a family, because when we were there, they said, well, we can't have kids and plant a church. And Jackie and I looked at each other like, well, we did, and it worked out great.
Yeah,
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 us too.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Well, so
and so,
let's go back to the early 2000s then.
Mm.
And I'm not assuming you agree with my assessment of this, but we've talked enough over the years that there was kind of a certain approach to church planting kind of in the early 2000s.
Mm.
And in the Christian church, if you wanted to get kind of historical about it, I think this is kind of my narrative, so other people could disagree or whatever, and that's fine. But we had a group in Northern California called the Northern California
Yep.
Evangelistic Association, and
NCE.
they
Yep.
started just kind of lighting it up.
Uh-huh.
There was a lot of church planting organizations, especially in the Northwest. I think I feel safe saying that a lot of them were kind of limping along at that point. And we had these evangelistic associations that were started. And the idea was you'd get a bunch of pastors that were kind of kingdom minded, and they would get together and pray and maybe contribute funds and then try to spin up new churches. But it wasn't very streamlined, right? It was very kind of like, well, let's just get together periodically and see if we could make something happen. And the success rate was low.
Mm.
They wouldn't plant very often. A lot of the church planting organizations would plant one maybe, every 5 years or something like that. In my years in doing this, I've ran across organizations that are a church planting organization that hasn't planted a church in 20 years. And you're like, man, what have you
Mhm.
guys been doing, right? And all of a sudden, there's this group in Northern California that kind of unlocked like the cheat code of like how to plant churches. And I don't think it's incorrect to say everybody wanted to get down there and figure out what these
Mhm.
guys were doing because they had
Mhm.
figured out like the secret sauce to how
Mhm.
you plant a church. And so from that, kind of a model emerged. And the group that I worked with in Oregon, and I think the group you worked with in Washington, and another group I know in Oregon, they all kind of started copying, running the plays of this group in Northern California who was experiencing really tremendous success. So much so that they actually went from being a regional Northern California to become what we now know as Stadia
Yep.
and go nationwide. That's how successful they were. People were
Yep.
flocking from all over the country to figure out how this group in Northern California was doing this. And a lot of the directors of our church planting organizations today, 20, 25 years later, are people that were either planters or employees with Stadia or in
Mhm.
its previous iteration, Northern California Evangelistic Association. So with all that as the background, Ben, what would you say when we started? I'd love to hear your take on this. What was kind of the model that you and I kind of jumped in on early in the 2000s, or the model that was being like championed back then?
Well, I remember the first thing that we were doing was creating a prospectus with a 3-year budget
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
demographic reports. It was like literally like a packet, like a
Business plan.
yeah, it's basically a
Yeah,
business plan. You kind of look at it as like
a
a
whole
spiritual
a whole
entrepreneur.
proposal. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 And then with that was that's how you raised money too. So you would raise money and you do that for a season, pretty intensely for 3, 6 months or longer to try to get to, a couple 100,000. I don't know, depending on where you were planting, it was more expensive or less. But you're basically prospectus, business plan, spiritual entrepreneur, getting investors. Sound like a business, but that's kind of what you were doing.
Yeah.
And then you would start meeting people and buying equipment and starting small groups, which would be your launch team. Then you'd have this whole launch process, and there was marketing and ad campaign. But essentially, when it came right down to it, you were doing a model that I guess now we title an attractional model.
Right.
So you were trying basically to do the best, kind of package you could to attract people. And it was really all based on the Sunday morning experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Right.
you did community
So,
events. Then go ahead.
yeah, so I was coming out of Bible college about the time you guys were planting these churches in 2004, 2005. And I was in New Orleans, and that was a Stadia church plant, Stadia East plant in New
Oh,
Orleans out of college. But there seemed to be not just like some of those like church in the box, like there was a whole company that was like mobile church, right? Where you could buy
Yeah,
the
literally
trailer
church
set
in the
up.
box. Yeah.
Yeah, like literally, and you could roll that into a movie theater and stuff and pack out your foyer space.
Yep.
But like I think one of the and maybe you guys could talk about this more too, but do you think that the location was a critical component to that model as well? Like where specifically these new churches were getting started?
there's a
There's
lot of that kind of there wasn't there like a lot of that kind of language about
Mhm.
location. I mean, like you said, business, right?
growth
Location.
rate. What's the population? How many people are moving? New.
Right.
It's easier to reach new people
Hmm.
that are transitioning
Yeah.
to a new community or
Hmm.
yeah, all the other big life things. It's easier
Right.
to reach people when that's happening. So if it's a new
Right.
community or upstart, yeah, people are moving in. They want to meet
Yeah.
people, and it's like prime target for
Yeah.
church planting, probably more in population centers than
I, f-
Monroe, Oregon.
And
I
you
feel like
mentioned
there was.
earlier in the previous episode, you mentioned that you said
Mhm.
Dallas had been growing by this many percent, and that's part of the formula. You're trying to identify communities that are like emerging communities that are growing rapidly in the conventional wisdom, which, by the way, none of these things are, I think, are untrue. There is just
Right.
part of the model is
Yeah.
like, hey, new people are probably not going to feel as welcome wandering into well-established churches, and they're
Mhm.
more likely to go, hey, we're new to the community, and there's a new church. So that was part of the conventional wisdom, and then, like you said, attractional. Um,
Hmm.
I would say in my experience everybody I ever talked to was talking small groups, right? And still are. But I don't know that it was like that. Like now, I think when we talk about what's going on now, we'll probably drift more toward that as the emphasis. But
Hmm.
then it was more like, let's get a big crowd and
It's
then
like
we'll figure out what to do with them. Then we'll figure
yeah.
out how to
Yep.
disciple them but there's some reasons why, and I think it's important to bring up is that the reason we were trying to get people to get like a big launch and a big start was to create a momentum and get a baseline. And a lot of it had to do, if we're being really candid about it, with money.
Yeah.
Because you have a
Hmm.
2-year budget. When we started, we had a 2-year budget to be self-supporting. And when I
Yeah.
was 27 and parachute dropped with my wife and our two small children into this town, I didn't know a soul. I've got 24 months before all of our money is gone.
From
And
the
there's a
outside, yeah.
there's
Yeah,
a
and you got to
pressure
kick back to the organization.
there's a pressure to like we have to
Yeah.
get this self-supported ASAP because
Right.
otherwise I'm going to be unemployed. And so how do you get the money coming in? Gather a big crowd. Meet
Bigger
people.
crowds.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's just a math thing, right?
It's
So
just a ratio of offering
right.
potential.
And so again, I want to say that kind of neutrally, like
Mhm.
there's reasons why that was the model and why
Mhm.
you did that.
Well, look, Jesus used attraction, not exactly the same way we're talking, but I mean, he could read people. He knew it was in it.
We
I'm
had
like,
bands and smoke machines, and he had miracles.
he had miracles, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So in some ways, it's not like, I mean, that's our culture too. We're attracted to celebrity. We're attracted to big momentum. That's why the big box stores, are still around because we like our product all that way. But yeah, it was a lot of pressure early on to try to. We had a 3 year, and I lost a lot of funding because of the whole Great Recession, whatever you call that.
Mhm.
So it's
Right.
like that felt even like more pressure. So I was pretty beat up by the end of that third year. We were
Sure.
self-supported, but man, it was hard to get there. And I
Yeah.
felt like from a ministry wise position, I spent more time trying to build the crowd and momentum than I was
Mhm.
disciple.
Yeah. And for young guys that were coming out of Bible college right in that era, because I mean, I remember there was a spring break where we went out to, well, at Ozark, we called it Week of Evangelism, not spring
Yeah.
break. So we went on missions trips. So, like a group of us went out to Sacramento and we worked with a guy named Barry Smith who had
Oh yeah,
started
very
that community church
impact. Yeah.
down in Elk Grove. So when I was growing up, I had a cousin that lived in Elk Grove, and it felt like it was far, far, far away from Sacramento. But by the time the early 2000s came around, it was basically like this road separated Sacramento from Elk
Yeah.
Grove, and so like the strategy of like going to away from smaller rural towns to these growing suburban areas, or in Oregon, we would think of places like Beaverton, Hillsboro,
Right.
Newberg, even, because it's just bleeding down that way.
Yeah.
And so it just seems like that was all a part of the secret sauce with the formula that was being taught. You need to raise your money. You got to go to a place that's growing so you can bring in people. You got marketing slogans like seven to stick. Let's introduce songs right up front that, like, there was a church plant we visited in Virginia Beach that opened the service with Sympathy for the Devil by the Rolling Stones. So like all these kinds of things were part of it.
Oh,
And I mean, and at the same time, it's like you would see people radically changing for Jesus, even in this model. It was incredible, but exhausting for sure.
Yeah. From a
so
leadership perspective, it's
Yeah.
so before we talk about kind of like what I think where your heart is today, Ben, and where my heart is, let's talk about maybe some of the and I don't think this is like just me and Ben's opinion. There's a move that's happening within ministry circles. I think people are kind of questioning what we've always done, and Tony, feel free to weigh in on this too. What do you
Mhm.
feel like? What do you sense that like where that's left us? We've kind of all pursued. I mean, when we were in Bible college in the 90s, early 90s, it was like attractional church growth. We were lapping up every Bill Hybels book we could get our hand on, Rick Warren. I mean, those were like textbooks in Bible college at a conservative Bible college in the Midwest. And everybody wanted to get a job at the big church. Everybody was trying to get that job at Southeast Christian or, one of these big churches. And now, like 20 years later, I feel like there's people are kind of disenchanted with that, or disenfranchised, maybe a better word with all that. And kind of there's like some different things being said. Where do you guys feel like, first of all, do you agree with that, with my assessment of that? And then, and like, why? Why this swing away from that? What's happening?
I think there's always going to be a place for the big box stores. I mean, there's always going to be I think, a place for the mega churches, and there's great things that God can do through those mega
Sure.
churches. I mean, my son's part of a mega church in Nevada.
My kids are, yeah.
They're doing great things. So God is using all of these models,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? But I
Mhm.
think there's a
Yep.
sense of
Mhm.
disillusion. I think especially the generations that are younger right now, just not loving the whole package of church and Jesus and conservatism and all that stuff. It's like I think they're trying to deconstruct some of the things that probably should be deconstructed and removed, because I think there's a thirst for something real and probably something risky and something
Mhm.
difficult.
Mhm.
Um, that a kind of a radical loving your neighbor return. Um, that's I'm sensing that in the next generations coming up, that they want real community, authentic relationships. They're wanting the things that I think we as ministry leaders have always been trying to foster,
Yeah.
albeit with imperfect tools. But that's what we want. We want people wanting to take up their cross daily and follow Jesus. We want people to reach
Right.
their friends, praying for people who are far from Jesus. And sometimes the program and the the reality of Sunday morning programming and bigger is better has kind of overshadowed some of that.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like as ministry leaders, I'm dreaming of a day where we'll spend way more time training and equipping than
Mm.
we are programming.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not like programming's bad. It's just that
Right.
Right.
bandwidth should be more toward what
Mm.
Jesus called us to do, which is the disciple making. And our role is to equip saints for the work of service. And I feel like um, we need to be coaches and mentors in training because that next generation, I think, is hungry,
Mm-hmm.
contented with the status quo. I think
Yeah.
they're fog machines, and I mean, I'm done with it. I feel just
Right.
bored with it. We're all
Right.
doing the same dumb songs.
Right.
Not dumb songs, it's bad, but
Right.
you know what I mean? It's like you walk into any church, I don't care what denomination it is, it's like the same Hillsong stuff and the
Right.
same Bethel stuff. And it's like
Right.
the four songs in the sermon.
We're so conditioned to jump on the next big fad that'll get us the next 100 people.
Mm.
It's like there's no creativity, there's no ingenuity. It's
And
like,
risk.
what's that?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, he said tough stuff. And I feel like, I think there's an odd, it's not like we don't want to, I don't want to suffer. I don't think people want to suffer or unnecessary risk. There's something kind of edgy to the teachings of Jesus. And I
Right.
think
Mm-hmm.
that's what maybe has gotten lost through all this is, yeah, take up your cross, leave everything, like be willing to give it all up. What?
I wonder if part of it is just what's happened like in our world and culture the last 5 years and how diluted truth has been. And people are longing for something that seems consistently true, you know? Like I think it was Barna came out recently, like within the last month or two, there's been an uptick of like 12 to 16%, I believe, since 2021 of
Mhm.
people proclaiming a commitment to Jesus. And the overwhelming majority of that has been in young men. And so I just wonder, like, I don't know what you guys have thought or experienced, but it seems like it's just so much noise and delusion in the world. I wonder if, like, if we could just put out the truth we've held on to for 2,000 years,
Mhm.
if that is what is winning the day with people or not.
Yeah. I think part of the attractional thing, and this has been something that I've been trying to champion in our ministry at our church and also at a small town network, is that we have to shift our mentality from church growth to kingdom growth. And if you'll make that one shift, guys, it's so different. It changes everything because I'll tell you, when you are with other pastors and you say your church is 100, you almost say that apologetically. It's
Mm,
almost like you're ashamed when you say our church is only 100. You might even say that qualifier, only 100.
right.
Conversely, there's a little pride that comes when you go, oh, we're over 200. Well, why does that feel better? Or 300, right? And I remember Jim Putman telling a story one time up at Real Life Ministries when him and his co-founding pastor Aaron, then the first day they hit 1,000 people. And he said they were in the truck after Easter Sunday and they had 1,000 people. And he said he told the story. He's like, so that's what 1,000 feels like. And then they were both like, huh. Like, okay, cool. And then he said we had the same conversation at 2,000 and 3,000, and he said the number never satisfies, right? And the problem with the church growth, and I'm going to call it what it is, I think, is it's an industry. They're selling us music, they're selling us songs, they're selling us books and strategies and packages that will help us get bigger. And again, if you think about, you can almost justify anything, by saying it's all about reaching people for Jesus. But when you say it's about the kingdom, then you can go, hey, our church, we had 173 on Easter. And I
Mm.
joked with my associate pastor who knows that story. I go, this is what 173 feels like. Huh. No. But you know what? The joy we have in saying, hey, we had 173 on Easter and we're sending a whole group of people away to plant a church in Jerome in October. We know we're
Mm,
going to lose 20 people. And
mm,
the industry would say that's not a strategic move. you're not big enough to send people away yet. And I'm like, well, why not? And there's a church down the street that I think we might merge with eventually. And if we do, we're going to try to send another 20 or 30 people over and try to get that one up and running, and not to make a campus out of it, but to make another church out of it. And when you shift from church growth to kingdom growth, you start seeing things different, and you're like, man, I want the kingdom to get bigger. I
Well,
don't need like another 200 people in my church to deal with. I just want the kingdom to get bigger.
I think there's, this sense of, yeah, kind of, you said industry. I'm not, I got to think about that for a while. They don't love how that feels.
I
But,
know
I
it feels
mean, in
dirty.
2018, 2019, I hired a pretty great guy, Andrew, as kind of my associate in the idea that he would maybe eventually take over for me. I don't know. But, we really just bought hook, line, and sinker, church growth flywheel stuff.
Yeah.
You get the sermon series, special days, you get this marketing campaign, you got hand invites and all this stuff. And it's like,
Yeah.
it was working great. I mean, we were starting to see that kind of
It
more
totally works.
crowd. And
Yeah.
then 2020 hit.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And then we both just had to do some navel gazing for a while and go,
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, this is what, and then we started kind of going back to what are we called to do? Make disciples. Is this really making disciples? And how do we know? Maybe it is, but maybe it isn't. Maybe our focus has been maybe on the wrong thing.
Mhm.
That maybe it isn't about, kind of more butts in the seat and, dollars in the bank, but maybe it's disciples who actually know how to disciple the people in their life. And we began to realize maybe there's a different way to do this.
Yeah.
And
So let's shift to that, because I think we have a few more minutes. So let's talk about how is this like call to like make disciples who make disciples? That's been kind of a shift, I think. I don't want to speak for you, but like in my journey as a pastor and a leader, I got on that train a while back, and I love it. It's been like life-giving, and I see the fruit of it. It's different fruit, but I love it. What kind of led you down that path to really get serious about disciple making? What's that look like at your church? And what's been like the difference in your experience since you kind of,
I think the
moved on
shift
that?
for me, I think it's always been something that's been a nagging deal. Um, since we started Dallas Church in 2007, I had this older guy, and he used to really annoy me. I loved him, but he used to annoy me. Every meeting we would have, he would say, "But Ben, what are we doing about discipleship?" And in my mind at that point, I'm thinking, "Whoa, we've got the Sunday teaching, and we got small groups, and we have these events." And he would say, "Yep, what are we doing about?" And it would just annoy me. And then all those conversations, and years later, he's now passed away. I really miss him. Um,
Mhm.
but I'm realizing that God was using him to speak to me. And so when COVID happened,
Mhm.
um, that kind of gave some space for Andrew, my associate, and I, just to kind of have these conversations, do some reading, do some praying about, is this actually what can we point to that's where disciples are being made and people are being trained up to do this? And we realize we're failing.
Mhm.
So coming out really the last 2 years, we've started to do, and this is a conversation we're having all the time, is starting to shift our focus so that we're spending less time in programming and events and all that stuff and more time in training up our people. And our hope is that every leader in our church is an equiper and a coach and a mentor, and every person in our church family, say we're 150 or 200, I would love it if down the road, every single person who calls himself a follower of Jesus knows exactly how to disciple somebody.
Mhm.
What does Jesus say? What do we do about it? Is
Mhm.
asking those questions over and over and over again. And so we've started shifting. That's what if we have small groups, they're using what we call the Discovery Bible Study. You guys have talked about that, Erik. Where we're really, there's not as much of a leader as a facilitator, and you're trying to interact with Scripture. Now, how do we put it into practice? And this is hearing what Jesus said and putting it into your behavior and your walk, and holding the bar high on some of that instead of lowering it. That this is what it means to be a disciple. And I said that on Easter. One of the things that I said is, you go through the story of Scripture, right? And then at the end, and I told my elders this, I'm like, I'm really going to hit this hard. And the last challenge was, look, obviously, if you've never heard this before, resurrection can start today, right? That's the person who's never said yes. And then there's the person that been following Jesus for a while, but you feel stuck. And I said, we need to get you in a disciple making environment where you can grow. Then there's the last one was, if you're a mature follower of Jesus, you're probably thinking, I've heard all this before.
Mhm.
We need you, and God needs you to be making disciples in your circle now. So if you are mature and you know all this stuff already, you have a mandate and a mission by Jesus to be an
Right.
ambassador to your circle. If you're not doing it, you're in disobedience.
I'm ready to sign up. Is there like a kiosk? That's awesome.
Right. Right.
I'm tired of this thing where it's just a few of us. And so I'd like
Yeah.
to see us start, it's hard to make a shift because that's the model I learned on. It's the model you learn. It's attraction, attraction, attraction.
Mhm.
Trying to just move the rudder a little bit more so that we're aiming more in line with that disciple making group. It's like what
Mhm.
Paul
When
said,
you and when
right?
you do that, man, it looks different. And this is what I tell people like when they come into our church, I'll be like, when you walk into our church on Sunday, you'll probably feel like this is just any old church you've ever been to. There's nothing much different going on Sunday morning. But if you look under the hood, we're a really different operation. So this last spring we were running like, 120 on Sunday, but we had 100 adults in Discovery Bible studies during the week.
Great.
And proportionally, that's really, if people don't know numbers, they won't understand, but that's really wacky. But and I'm not saying that with any kind of boastfulness or like 100 people in it, nothing like that. Just to
Amazing.
say, but we've put our emphasis on that. That's what we focus on. And so conversely, we don't have programs. We haven't had, Celebrate Recovery and a midweek kids program, Awanas, and we don't have any of that. And we've told people for the first 5 years, we're doing Sundays and we're doing groups, and that's it. Because
Mhm.
on the outside of Sunday, we're working with trying to train people to make disciples. We're trying to raise up guys to preach and lead and plant churches. And so it's like, well, how is your little church in Idaho, on its second, third, and fourth church plant? We don't spend time on programs. We spend a lot of time, intentional time on people, trying to
Mhm.
raise people up and create. I think this is a big secret to what you're saying is you've alluded to in both of our episodes here about time with people.
Mhm.
You don't
Mhm.
disciple people from a stage. They can
Mhm.
learn, they can pick up things, they can have breakthroughs. All the preaching is great. I love preaching, but
Mhm.
people they don't progress as disciples from a stage. They progress from relationships. And
Mhm.
so taking that time to sit down and walk with people and teach them how to share their faith and teach them how to lead a study and teach them how to preach a sermon and all those things.
Mhm.
It's taken 4 or 5 years of this vision for us to start seeing the fruit of that because
Mhm.
we're not trying to grab guys who just graduated from Bible college. We're trying to raise people up.
Yeah,
And I know both you guys have done some of that. Am I tracking? Are you tracking with me? What I'm saying?
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's hard. I mean, like, yeah, some of the the emphasis that we've tried to shift here is we're doing trainings once a month on um, all the things we do in ministry. Having hard conversations. How do you pray with people? What's a hospital visit look like? I mean, all of it. Just um,
You're doing
trying
training? You're doing
to,
training on that?
yeah.
Like group training or like individual? How's that?
It ends up being like there's maybe 15 to 20 on a given training day, depending on what
Get
we're
out of
doing.
town.
And so what we're doing is, again, we're called to what? Train up and equip. And I'm like, I don't know all the ways to do this. I just know that bandwidth wise, people in our community will extend their Sunday a little bit.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So we're getting food and we're like, well, we're going to use that slot. Is
Mhm.
that a lot of times easier for people for whatever reason? We're going to use that as a training tool. So all of our ministry and elders are there in that meeting explaining how to do what we do in ministry.
I love that.
Because I want
Awesome.
everybody to do this. It's like we've got
Yeah.
to push this down.
Man,
Um,
I would love some notes from that because
Me
one of
too.
our goals here soon is what we realized in this like shift of mentality through COVID, especially because as you mentioned, it was a big thing for us when half our church left because they didn't like what we decided to do. Um, oh, we have a discipleship problem if that made that many people upset, you know. But one of
Exactly.
our one of our goals in this process of kind of rebirthing ourselves in a way is to develop a pastoral care ministry where we have people who are equipped and enabled to take on those things that we've been dropping the ball on, helping people feel cared for, visiting them when they're shut in, you know, all these types of things. So I would definitely, I know this isn't a podcast, but I want more information from you for my
Yeah.
own purposes. You know,
Well, I
so,
don't know that we've got the perfect thing, but we just kind of listed all the things that we do in ministry. And it's like people can do this, and we need to equip them to do the work of ministry.
yeah, yeah.
And that may change in 2 or 3 years. I don't know. But like COVID really made us realize that our dependency on gathering in a room for 1 hour on a Sunday is way too high.
Hmm.
That will
Yeah.
always be a great celebration, but that should be the pep rally for the real work, you know?
Yeah.
Do you remember, I don't know if you remember saying this to me, Ben, but in one of our talks over the years, you said everything that we were trained to be good at happens on a stage. Do you remember saying that?
Yes, yes.
And it's right, you know, and I think, and I love my Bible college experience. I know Tony loved his, and you know, we're not here to bag on Bible college. Um, but I feel like the things that we were trained to be good at mostly happen from a stage, or are things that we do in preparation for what happens on the
Sure.
stage.
Yep.
And so a lot of us feel like
We need to make a
passionate about
shift.
this call to make disciples, but we don't know how to do it. So I love this idea that you're talking about. And that's just like open to the whole church, like you just announced, like anybody who
Yep.
wants to.
And like I said,
Right.
we had 170 people here on Sunday, and 20 of them showed up for the training. And I'm just like, I told Andrew, doesn't
Praise
matter.
God.
We're going to keep going because I
That's
want
awesome.
everybody to have a chance to do this. And then, yeah, probably 10, 20%. But look, if we have, think of your Sunday number.
Hmm.
If you even had half of those people that we were confident and they were confident they could make a disciple, they're all in circles of influence. Doesn't matter if those people end up
Absolutely.
showing up at our church. That is a kingdom win. It's a
Right.
shifting
Yeah.
of idea. I will never have access to some of these people's circles of
Right. But
influence.
you do.
Right.
They
Right.
do. And so
Right.
now we have this group of people that are gathering on a Sunday. The whole feel should be different. That should be a celebration of all the things God has been doing in all those relationships. And that's the day I'm excited about.
We
Hmm.
do kind of start wrapping this up. We do something like that in the same kind of vibe, but we say to people, you know, hey, when we do groups, we'll say, hey, we'd love you to get in a group, but even better, we'd love you to start one with people you know.
Hmm.
And if you'd like to know how to start a group, and for the people that are listening that aren't familiar with Discovery Bible Study, you can jump on the
So easy.
website, Small Town Network. We have a lot of resources on there. And Ben, if someone wanted to contact you, would it be okay if I throw your like church contact email in the show notes or whatever?
Yep,
Do
absolutely.
you guys
Yep.
have like an info ad or something like that?
Well, I mean, we've got, I'm on Instagram doing stuff.
Okay.
We're on Facebook, all the socials, our churches, but
Okay.
yeah,
I'll put
just,
the links up.
yeah,
Right on.
send it on.
Well, hey man, we're out of time. Thank you so much for jumping on. I love talking with you. I'd love to get you on again. I've had this idea about having a couple of like episodes where we bring a couple of people that have been planters before like this and kind of table like a topic like with some more advanced notice and kind of bring in bat the ball around a little bit. So appreciate you, man. Always good talking with you.
Good
Um,
talking with you guys.
and thanks for your faithfulness in that in your small community, you know, in a smaller church for 18 years. That's awesome, man.
Thank you,
Awesome.
Lord.
I
Awesome.
think that that's a lot of the success that guys have in small churches come by becoming part of the community for a long time. Uh,
Hmm.
you're kind of viewed with suspicion for the first several years, and so you got to stick it out and stay, have that stay.
That's what's great about, yeah, kind of longevity. It's the
Yeah.
small, what obedience in the right direction. What is that quote that
Oh
every,
yeah, it's actually like it was the name of a book by Eugene Peterson, but it's a Friedrich Nietzsche quote, a long obedience in the same direction. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what God's called us to, faithfulness in the small things,
Hmm.
and the small towns.
Well
Hmm.
said. All right, guys. Well, hey, thanks for listening today. If you like what we're doing, please like or subscribe. If you're interested in Small Town Network, you can find us online at smalltownnetwork.com. And if you believe in the importance of planting disciple-making churches in smaller communities, we'd love you to consider partnering with us in prayer and financial support. You've been listening to the Small Town Pastor Podcast.